We are now joined by Mark Beall, the president of Government Affairs for AI Policy Network and former Pentagon AI Policy Director. Mark, thank you for joining RSBN's live desk. Let's walk through artificial intelligence. We have Grok 4, we have situations where people like Elon Musk saying this is the most exciting technology, but also the most frightful thing I've seen. And we know how Elon has contributed to all of this artificial intelligence. How can the United States get ahead of this so that we can dominate on a world scale?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. This administration put out a document today that I think is going to set the agenda for the next 4 years. And it's only been out for a couple hours now, and in our initial read, it seems very promising. It of course identifies AI as it will be a transformative and potentially decisive technology for the future of the world, for our country, and for our role in shaping the sort of course of human history here. And I think the administration has identified all of the most important, like, kind of key efforts that it needs to undertake in order for us to be successful. It's very clear to me that whoever was behind this document writing this, they knew what they were doing. And there's a lot of meat and goodness in here. And by the way, it's not just all utopian happiness, and there's also a very sober assessment that, look, AI could, as it presents all these amazing opportunities, it could pose a series of threats to jobs, threats to national security. And it's taking a very fair and balanced view in terms of trying to get the government's head around all of that.
You know, I find it very interesting because Pope Leo XIV, even the name he took, somewhat followed Pope Leo XIII and what was happening in the late 1800s with all of the industrial technologies and the emerging working technologies, talking about the dignity of work, but also what it might take away from those who are relying on good paying jobs. So what are some of the opportunities you see, Mark, and what are some of the negatives when it comes to the job market in the United States?
I mean, in the near term, it's quite clear that AI will offer enormous productivity benefits to the folks who adopt it and to use it. You know, as the kids call it, ChatGPT. I let my 16-year-old use it, and whether it's about his exercise routines and just augmenting his education, having sort of another voice when it comes to healthcare. Although you can't necessarily always trust it, but it can certainly give you another kind of perspective on some key issues. Even just yesterday, I used it to order and replace my wash machine and dryer that had broke. So in terms of everyday life, there's some really great use cases. Unfortunately, though, on the dark side, there was a Harvard Business study Harvard Business Review study that looked at the kind of three main use cases today. They seem to be used for therapy, for sex, and for companionship. And so I think there's where the questions around guardrails we need to start thinking heavily about. Because I think that's going to enter into a place in which AI may be starting to use inappropriately, and we just need to be cautious about some of that stuff too.
Right, and it solely pops up right on your phone as you're scrolling really any content, whether it be on social media. Just two examples today. One of the very positive things, as we are scheduling different great interviews, including yourself, Mark, email shared with me that, oh, this is exactly what you're doing in the time frame. So that works out very nicely as you're going through multiple emails. The other side of it, some rather disturbing and disgusting AI images that said, hey, do you want to schedule a meeting with this AI bot regarding what you just mentioned? I said, no, thank you. I'd like to go on and exit out of that. But for young minds especially, it might be very disturbing, and it might lead people down a path that can lead to addiction, lead to confusion. Also, the fact that just like in the legacy media, trying to get that information out there, there are insidious actors throughout the world who would like to confuse people, including the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we have to be extra cautious with our young minds, especially children who may be vulnerable, who may have mental health issues. There's already been examples of AI bots encouraging children to actually commit suicide. And so parents need to be extra attentive to their children and watching how it is that they can use this technology. Because at the end of the day, and what this White House document, I think, very clearly highlights is that the AI developers, they may understand how this stuff works at a big picture level, but the details of how it works and why it works the way that it does, no one really understands it. It's almost like more alchemy than it is science. And that's why this White House is helping assure American leadership by investing in a field of AI science called interpretability and control. These are the types of investments that's going to help scientists exist, unpack these models, figure out exactly how they work, and apply safeguards so that children can't be exploited and harmed.
And Mark, given your background at the Pentagon, what does this mean for national security, and how does this change the face of warfare? We were there for the Flag Day big, beautiful parade that took place, and we saw some of those dogs or even humanless tanks that can go in and actually take care of the mission. But does this mean that we're in a more dangerous world now as a result of the weapons that can be produced by AI technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. AI in some respects is like the ultimate, what we call dual use technology. So all of these amazing innovations that can be done with AI for good there's almost like a dark corollary for them as well. So imagine if you're thinking about trying to use AI to cure cancer or develop some novel medical cure for some nasty disease. Well, that same type of underlying know-how can be applied in a malicious and malevolent way and be used to create bioweapons. If you have a great AI that can help with you, write amazing software and product and innovate and sell and do things on the internet, well, that same capability can be used to design very sophisticated malware and cyber weapons. And so it's going to be it's a tough balance between how you think about this as a commercial technology versus a military one. We are watching this technology being fielded right now in the war between Russia and Ukraine. And we're seeing like very cheap AI-enabled hardware platforms destroying very expensive capital assets. For example, $1,000 unmanned boat destroying a $250 million Russian, battleship. And this is definitely going to profoundly affect the nature or the character of warfare in ways that I think we're only now starting to appreciate.
And we have definitely seen that in the stalemate that is Russia and Ukraine. One of that scary technologies being those drones that can literally just shoot fire from yards and yards away and literally burn a soldier or just burn an area, even civilians as well. So we pray for the end of that tragedy. But here at home, Mark, how can parents be prepared for this to protect their children against any malware or anything that might come into the home? Because, we lock our doors, we build walls, we build fences, but now it's all coming in through these things amongst other technologies. So how can parents really harness that awareness to protect their young children?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at the end of the day, AI, like electricity, are what scientists call a general purpose technology. And so while it is that not everybody needs to become an electrical engineer, everyone needs to know not to stick the proverbial fork in the electrical socket. And that's a kind of a good way of thinking about AI. So for example, now that we know AI can do things like voice cloning, and I think even the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, fell victim of this a few weeks ago. We don't want grandma to fall victim to a scammer who's like cloning the voice of their grandson, saying their grandson's in jail and that they need money wired immediately. And so I think the first and most important thing we can do for our families is basic levels of education to understand what the capabilities can do, and then basic kind of like prudent and practical things you can do to protect yourself, like code words. If you get a phone call from a family member that sounds just like little Johnny, you need to validate that that's little Johnny's actual identity. Another thing you might want to think about is, whereas in the past, cyber attackers would sort of spam you like the Nigerian princes or whatever, and it was very clear, like you would read that and say, well, that's probably not, somebody really trying to talk to me. Well, with AI, that the sophistication and the scale of those types of attacks are increasing. So we just have to be vigilant. We have to monitor, and we just have to be cautious about who we trust and making sure we're validating the sources before we take any action that could compromise our security.
Yes, and not to make light of it, Mark, but sometimes I like to joke around, make sure you watch a Will Smith movie or even Terminator for Skynet, because it seems as if it's silly, but some of these technologies we now have, even if you go back to the Future, some of those things that were talked about in there, those same themes, we now have some of those technologies right here in 2025. So it's amazing for some of us in our lifetimes how quickly this technology has increased and grown for the better and for the worse. But we'd love to have you on again. Right Side Broadcasting Network's live desk, Mark Beall, president of Government AI Policy Network and a former Pentagon AI Policy Director. Thank you for your expertise today.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.